Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Trading Brains. We're back with another episode. I'm your host, Evan Greif, here with my co host, Angelo Messina. We're really excited to bring you another episode this week. We decided to create a sort of mini segment, not a complete segment, because most of our segments we do, repeatedly. But this mini segment is going to be about alcohol, different types of alcohol, how you drink it. Examples like over the next couple weeks, we're gonna go over beer, vodka, tequila, etc. You name it. And if there's like new ones coming out that we didn't talk about or we haven't heard of, please let us know, and we'd love to do an episode on it. But for today, to start us off on round one of this mini segment, Angelo is going to talk about beer. So, Angelo, take point.
Thank you, Evan, for that
Mm-hmm.
lovely introduction.
Oh, yes, of course.
And yes, about beer as a whole, from the history, like it's one of the world's oldest prepared drinks. It can date back 13,000 years old from like
That's
semi-nomadic rituals and like in the mountains, like to
wow.
like
It's like way
kind
before,
of like
way
yeah, to like ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt time that in the sense of like, because really what they had was water, barley type of wheat or whatever type of grains that they use, and then
exactly.
yeast. So if you add those three together, it's bread.
Right.
Besides the actual fermentation, let it sit in the wort, which is basically just the water, yeast or whatever of whatever choice of fermentation process, as well as the type of grain. Barley is mainly what they use, but also sugar too, which they do get. Um,
What do you
but
think
this
went through the mind of the person who first discovered that, like, if you just ferment it past the wort stage, you can drink it? You know what I mean?
I could see it being a big mistake. I
Oh
could see
yeah,
it
maybe
being
some
like,
guy drinks it on a dare, like.
no, well, I can see it like they were trying to make something, and then he got, hey, come over here, and he left it and just
Right.
left it just ferment, and I forgot a couple of days, like a couple 7 days, a week,
Yeah, yeah.
and it
It's probably
became
just experimentation.
but like since you have all the product but making bread, it's just a simple, or it could be like some guy just actually thought of making it because it had been dated so back that people were making it, so they probably wrote it down how to make it, and
Mhm.
probably the first time was probably by accident. A lot of the great inventions were founded by accidents.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
Um,
can't imagine that like beer would be created in a vacuum, meaning like no human interaction. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like there's no beer that is like there's no beer lakes in the wild,
of
right?
course.
Which would be awesome, but you know.
or like or like a tree that like this, instead of being sap or honey or like sap, it's beer or like
Yeah, you got like
alcohol.
natural wood taps, right? It's just
Yeah,
like, all right, put your mug in.
or you have a fountain that is just like it's just beer instead of being water. It's just a fountain of beer.
Yeah, yeah.
You get that
We can
anytime
only
for
we can
free.
only dream, Angela. We can only dream.
Well, actually, like this is actually a fun fact about like the history, what they did, like Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt as well, like for the Great Pyramid, like during that time when workers were building, instead of taking some sort of currency or food, they'll take it actually in daily rations of beer.
Hmm.
And they were using it as more of like instead of it get beer and bread and kind of like that goes carbs and carbs, right? Back
Yeah.
then nutrition wasn't really a factor, was basically you get your nutrients somehow, you're good for the next day or a week or whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll take payments of bread and also beer
Hmm.
as a refreshment or and nourishment during the time when they building these pyramids or during the ancient Mesopotamia, like in the city building stuff. So it was actually pretty cool of how the consumption of beer became a payment. So then like later on, like you go into tablets are making, because now since they're constantly making this beer, now they want to know how to make different kind of beers as well as high quantity with different kind of segments, like adding sugar or adding different kind of barley and see what they're going to make and write it
Yeah.
down so the next person can perfect it.
Yeah, just kind of like experiment to take it in different directions.
And all this stuff became more like a ritual slash payment wise. So then later on, when you get into Europe, spread by like the Celtic, the Vikings, the Germanic tribes,
Hmm.
and that became more of a you sit down, you're with people, you're having fun at events, parties, rituals. Now it's becoming more of a social thing, and as well as they're start adding more stuff. Like in Germanic tribe, they start adding more hops, which add the flavors. So like now you're thinking about the IPAs or your Malbecs, your not Malbecs, IPAs, and more of your like other ales that you could do, barley,
Mm.
hops, that add different flavors, like a little kind of like you have to kind of like chew or like kind of like a meal as itself, or as it goes down smoothly, like your typical, I'm going to say current, now your typical Bud Light that a lot of college people would drink because it's really simple to
Yeah, it's
make.
easy to make it. Yeah.
And yeah,
Sorry, no, I was just gonna say like when you mention IPA, I always get curious like was it made in India or is it just called India Pale Ale? Or I remember like a story where like they could only there was like a voyage or something. They went to India or I don't know what
mhm.
I'm talking about. But like I was always curious why it's called India Pale Ale, right?
Well, that like so with the like in the initial the Indian Pale Ale, it's during the time of like the British Empire. So I could see it being when they did come over there, it was more in the fact of like for the British to take home from when they went over to India. And
Hmm.
it could be a new pale ale, which that's what it used to be. And I'm actually trying to look at it now, just like a quick search, and initial is providing beer to the British Empire in the East. So it was to brew, and they brought it over to England and then brew it. So they got the hops from India to start going from
Ah,
there.
okay, okay, okay. I got it.
It says Indian Pale Ale, and the answer is probably named beer to the British Empire in the East because it was too hot to brew in India. So they
Yes,
got it
okay.
from India, they
Yeah.
transported it there.
Hmm. All right. So that's what it is. That's the story, people. If you didn't know, now you know.
The more you know. So
Yeah.
going
With the
back to
rainbow.
the dramatic, like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So going back to like beer and like the history. So like then it becomes more in the dramatic tribe, like the dramatic people, and now into the 14, 15, 1600s in that range. They start actually making more of the regulation because since now everyone's doing it, like you don't know what they're doing. So they might add something a little bit strain that got people sick or and they don't know that now they're getting to the point like why it's like we want beer to be consistent to the point that like people are not getting sick and trying we want people to have a good beer and have it like
Have it
monetized
be
and
like
also
standardized.
regulated, yeah,
Yeah.
standardized
Okay.
throughout the whole nation, country, worldwide, basically.
Hmm.
So William IV, Duke of Bavaria, actually adopted the purity laws, and this has became perhaps the oldest food quality regulation still in use in the 21st century.
Hmm.
So now it's only allowed ingredients of like for beer, water, hops, and barley and malt. So this is without sugar. So like anything that has an American like Bud Light, Budweiser, Miller Lite, all of those like light beers that people like to drink, they will
Like sugar.
completely fail in there,
Huh.
in the sugar because in order to increase the alcohol content, you will naturally add more food or add more substance for the yeast to take.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
the easy way, the cheaper way, instead of growing all these like different kind of malts, barley, hops, you just
Right.
add sugar.
Okay.
Add more sugar, you get more alcohol product, and that was the whole point. So this
Right.
guy like didn't want just beer, just random like the same quality, the same type of beer. They want different kind of beers, adding different hops. Kind of became more of a art of it than your normal beer, water, yeast, and some malt. That's it.
Yeah.
Done, finished.
That's
Call it
it.
a day. So now people are doing it in monasteries as well as like you have like the Abbey Ale. Like now like
Mm.
those are actually like really smooth and very rich in their
Yeah,
taste.
that was always interesting to me. Like, and not to like get away from beer, but I don't know if
Hmm.
you remember watching it wasn't Outlaw King or like Vikings, right? Like when they go, the one of the big fat bishop, I think, who was like
Hmm.
with the king in England. He was always talking about like these expensive like old wines, and I
Yeah.
never known that like the church was always like big into making wines and other, I
Hmm.
guess, other alcohol products too. Like I didn't know they were
Well,
commissioned by the crown to do that.
yeah. So like with the for the monasteries back in like in the England time when they made all the wine for one they made the wine for the blood of the Christ,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So they
Yeah.
give that during the mass and but then after that they kind of sell it as um they had bars and they had like taverns to sell, but also to get the better one they kind of like this wine is from the blood of Christ or
Mm.
from the Christ that blessed down, so this will get you drunk and you still feel good about yourself and not breaking the rules. It was
Okay.
in the sense of like I like I'm not saying like full on that's a proof, but it's
Right.
saying like
Right.
I can see
The
um
logic behind it.
the logic behind Catholicism or actually any other like in the Catholic region being like, hey, this is from the Christ, you should buy us over from here instead of your typical tavern wine or ale
Right.
or whatever you want to buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So later on, then, so at this point, started to develop, people are like, okay, what is the next step? How can we measure certain, um, one, temperature of different brews, how much alcohol content can you have? Because beer generally lasts anywhere from like 3% to like now you start seeing 9%, 11%, 12% kind of type of beers.
Really? Well,
And
actually,
most
like say I've seen
9%.
9%, but like 12 is
Um,
kind of rare.
You could go like so wine is about 14, so you could see some beers trying to reach it
Okay.
because of different kind of yeast strain they use. Um, and then that's when you go. But normally people would like to stay in the range around 5 because the more alcohol content then the volume of total consumption you could take is smaller. So
Yeah.
people so basically, now we're going fast forward. Now the brewing industry is booming. Now this has become a global business. How are you going to transport all these stuffs? Before it used to be like small couple, but probably like 10 to 100 of bottles are being produced now. Now they're producing for the whole world. So now
Yeah.
they're making billions of liters or billion of
Mhm.
gallons into to try and serve the whole world of any like any type of American beer, German beer, and whatever. So
Yeah,
they
I'm
have to
sure it used
find
to
a
be all
way.
like bottled, and
So,
now like you have canned beer, and
so
yeah.
like used to be bottles with corks. Now it's
Right.
bottles with like these like caps on, and now you have to use a bottle opener or something to open that beer to
Yeah.
keep the carbonation preserved and fresh. So that's starting, and that was accepted worldwide to prevent harmful rays from, and they use brown bottles so it protects the beer from UV lights.
Mm, right. Yeah, yeah, I've noticed that.
And like
Noticed that.
some like instinctions, like instead of using brown, they use green, like your Heineken bottles.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
some like Corona they use a clear bottle, and that because of their own stuff, and not because their beer is actually more stable in that in the warmer temperature, so they don't have to worry about the
UV rays.
UV rays to change the type of beer that they have.
See, I had actually never paid attention to that. That's interesting. Like I didn't know the color of the bottle was a factor in its protection from UV sunlight.
Mhm.
So, thank you for that. Hmm.
So like for your brewing, we did talk about brewing in our earlier episodes, but I'm gonna just give a quick
Yeah.
run.
So, check that out too if you're interested.
Just your typical in order to make your wort is you add your water and you add whatever malt that you are using. It's still a wort before you add the yeast. So you kind of bring that to a boil and kind of denation and kind of make them mash. So then the yeast, when you do add the yeast, that mash is very accessible that the yeast can start producing alcohol and CO2 as making the little carbonation to ferment.
Okay. Right.
As it is brewing, now the wort it will convert into your beer. So when it converts your wort converts to any alcohol, then it starts becoming your quote unquote quote beer. And there's a couple other steps in between. And in our earlier episodes, we do go more in depth. But now I'm just want to talk about more about the history of beer, which we have talked about. The brewing process, we did talk about in an earlier episode, and kind of like let
Yeah.
that ferment. Some beers can go from 3 months and 6 months, or it could be a couple weeks, depending on how much alcohol content you want and what kind of flavor profile you want as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as a
Um,
refresher, when you're like cooking the wort and then, eventually adding the yeast after the boil, are you using like stainless steel or like what do people usually use for
so
holding that?
when I made a couple of batches, I use everything that's like stainless steel, metal, because one like bacteria doesn't grow, and I always have a sanitation bucket. So
Right.
every time I use my spoon or like ladle to like mix the beer, mix the wort around, I put it directly back into the sanitation bucket because so then it doesn't infect my wort, my product that I'm trying to
Right.
make.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you have any sort of bacteria instead of yeast, they will actually compete to live and then become not. It will be
It won't be
beer
what
with
you
funky
expected.
taste, but like, it won't be your take. It won't be your take on it. And the
Yeah,
basic
yeah.
main thing when you do make your beer is sanitation of every single product. That whatever the beer's gonna touch, had to be sanitized because the moment 1 ounce of not sanitized going into your beer, it will mess up the taste and everything else, and also could make you sick because you don't know what bacteria is in there.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So that's one thing. If you ever want to get into it, it's learn, clean, and sanitize everything. After that, then you can start learning how to brew. And different kind of brews can be in different kind of stuff. People could put it into glass or wood cast ales. So that
Mm,
all depends on your preference,
right.
as well as type of ingredients. You could use barley, any kind of starch that you could use, water, of course, that you need, and you could use corn, rice, wheat, and also you could just use a little bit of sugar with your malted barley.
You can use
Um,
rice.
so yeah, but like wooden rice, you can add a little flavor, but rice is mainly named for sake.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I actually want
Corn
to do an episode on that too. That'd be really
and
cool.
then also corn, it's like for whiskey, but also you could
Mm,
make it more for or and also moonshine as well. But you could add some corn to make a different profile taste to your beer.
mm, okay.
Um, so like you have then like now after that now you have your now like today's kind of like you have all now it's all about competition. So what type of beer you like, what type so like this type of style of beer like you have your ales, lager, pilsners, IPAs, and these are all reference to it could be where's the regions from, the type of barley or grain that you use, as well as where like instead of it just being um like where it could be like a Belgium style, but also it'd be
Mm,
made in like Belgium style, but be made in Germany,
huh.
or a French
Okay.
style that's made in Belgium.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
And it depends on how you want to do it. And this can go from like an amber ale all the way down to your like double bock. Um, in their IPAs are Klosch, which is a German style, and it's actually just called Klosch. Malt
close.
liquor, is American style malt liquor. Then you have your like they have something called Old Broom, which is a brown beer, your brown ales,
Hmm.
kind of like your Belgian like Flounders, if everyone's
Yeah, a
heard
lot of
about.
these I haven't heard about actually.
Your pilsners, pills, porters, which is very dark, and your stout. Red ale
Yeah.
is actually really popular in Ireland,
Hmm.
and it goes down to like and then now people are doing like microbrews and they're adding their own, so they're doing like their kind of like hybrid, like so they add
Hmm.
fruit to it or honey or rye.
Right.
Um, some there's a smoked beer that I just read, vegetable. They use different kinds of spices, or your pumpkin spice beer,
Wow. Yeah, yeah, that's
your pumpkin beer
in
during that
October.
holiday.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or it'd be your normal ale, but then they age it into a wood casket,
Mm.
a wood barrel, and they keep it there. And different kind of wood can actually change the taste. So hickory or cherry wood, and kind of changing that whole profile of that taste.
Do they ever reuse those casks, like for different
Uh,
beers? Or they always you reuse them for like the same beer? I'm
um,
curious on that.
so when the wood casted, depending on how they're going to do with the wood casted, I would use the same type of beers and the same type of wood casted. But
Yeah, yeah.
I know more professional can talk about that more than I would. Um,
For sure. That's kind of like a trap question. My bad. I was just wondering because like
um,
whiskey does that actually. I think when I was researching tequila, they said that like a lot of the casks that they use, they don't like reuse a lot.
yeah,
So basically like whiskey, when you make whiskey, they tend not to reuse some of the giant barrels.
yeah,
So tequila manufacturers, they don't really have a problem with using old whiskey ones.
yeah,
Because it actually kind of complements the tequila sometimes. So
yeah.
that's just like I don't know, something to keep
I
in
think
mind.
if you're gonna add two different style beers, then I would just have one for one and another for the other. Don't mix match after you use
Yeah,
it. But I think
yeah,
I would just try and like repurpose this as another thing instead of
yeah.
reuse.
Well, that
Um,
hybrid thing sounds cool.
yeah. So now, um, a lot of people now like you have your microbrews that are changing it up. Now, what a lot of people are doing is like different kind of colors to the beer, not like they're adding food color shades of color, but like you look, if your Miller Lite's, Core Light, they're very light, very transparent.
Mm,
Then you go to your Guinness, and a lot of people like if you've been to Ireland, you've been to the Guinness factory, they'll teach you the proper way, which is you fill 2/3 to 3/4 of the beer, pause, let it rest for like a couple of seconds, and then you pour the rest. Then you have that nice like kind of gradient coming from really really light from like the head of the beer to all the way at the bottom, and you see
mm,
this nice coloration like gradient going down, and
right.
that's I think the proper way to go. And then a lot of people it's like, oh, you're drinking it slow when there's no head left. So that people like, oh, you're drinking it slow because now you just see the body of the beer because now everything has settled down
Yeah,
to the bottom.
yeah, yeah. What are out of all these types that you listed, like which ones are your favorites? Or like do you
My
have a preference?
My preference, I kind of stay away more from like the darker beer, like the porters and the stouts. Nothing against them. It's not my cup of beer. It's like a cup of tea,
Yeah.
but I'm more for the Weissen siphon, the wife's beer, the wit beer. More has that color situation. So like a normal popular drink that people do drink, Blue Moons. I do like that cloudy,
Mm,
kind of like full body taste to it. You add a little citrus on it, kind of
yeah.
complements that. Or a lot of people with beers, like they add like kind of alcohol. So like a Boilermaker, you're just getting any light beer and you add a shot of whiskey to it. Or your
Mm,
Irish car bombs is Guinness with a shot of Jameson in there. Or
yeah.
Guinness is Guinness with a half shot of Jameson and a half shot of Bailey's, as well as then people in other countries do their own variation, like soju with their beer or sake as well with sake bomb, or soju bomb. I normally like either Mondelos. I really do like different time the years. I do like different types. Like my summer beer is more for Mondelos as well as
Corona?
no. I'm not a big fan of
No.
Corona unless
Oh,
it's a loaded Corona.
okay. What is
Not
that?
loaded Corona is it's your Corona beer and with a shot of Bacardi Limon, and you put
Huh.
it into the beer and you kind of like shake it, so the Bacardi Limon acts as your lime or
Wow,
lemon,
that's cool.
and like a couple of those depending on
You
how
get
challenged and of the age
yeah,
of anyone's over the age of 21 or whatever country you are listening at,
yeah,
whatever that age of drinking age, that's when you
yeah,
start drinking.
yeah.
Um, we don't condone anything else.
Of course not. course not. Responsible.
Responsible.
Yeah.
Drink
For
responsibly.
me, like I'm kind of the same. Like I do enjoy a dark beer, but I
Mhm.
know that it's a lot of carbs, and I think sometimes I get like I don't know, stomach issues the next day, or like my head hurts maybe with the hangover.
Mhm.
I'm personally a fan of like the Weiss beers or the Hefeweizens, kind of like you or the wheat beers.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I have friends who love pale ales. Like they just love the hops and stuff like that. So I'm
Yeah.
just like,
So
all
I
right,
know
well,
that's
everyone has
love
their preference, but yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
I know a lot of people that go into it in the sense of just pure social aspect. They don't care what kind of beer they drink. They just like drinking the
yeah.
light. So they
Or they'll
like just
drink what everyone else is ordering. They're like, oh, I'll try that. Yeah,
yeah. And let's just say there's people like also like beer is not just like has alcohol. There's also like non-alcoholic beers that
Hmm.
like Old Duels are the perfect example of non-alcoholic, which they do have like alcohol in it, but the
Yeah. It's like
percent
point
like
zero
point
one.
0.5.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I had non-alcoholic beer once when I was in Berlin actually. And it was funny because like it said like free refills on blah 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 beers, right? And they just wrote the abbreviation all capitals AF beers. So I was like, okay, I'm sure AF is like a brand name or something like that, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get free refills on my beers, and then I get this beer, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't feel drunk at all. But I feel like this weird. I felt like this weird sensation, right? It was like
Yeah.
kind of like it's like pseudo drunk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so
So
like that was pretty cool because at like when I went to like where I went to college, we put a prank on someone because he was like, "Oh, I could drink so much,"
right, yeah,
and so we just kept on giving him old duels, and he kept on drink. He drank a, a 12 pack, and this guy was plastered. He said that he was plastered.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So and he was like, "Oh, he was walking funny and whatever," and we were like, like we're all thinking like this guy's either lying to us or he has the lowest tolerance in the whole entire world,
Yeah, or it's a batch of
or
O'Doul's.
or he found
A
or he
batch.
found, yeah, or something, whatever the case may be, and we
Yeah,
told him it's like, "Oh, you've been drinking Old Duels the whole time," and
right.
his sober was from like apparently really really drunk to like he was like really. You're like, yeah, like, why were you faking us? So it's either that you faked that you were drunk, or you're
Yeah,
really lightweight. And it's like, no, no, I was faking. I was like, okay, now the storage comes out. But
yeah.
now like before, so like a lot of like the beer, like when you're drinking beer, like yes, they contain yeast, but
Hmm.
they actually have a lot of like nutrients in it because like you do get other stuff from because like bread, like people call it, like sometimes refer as liquid bread.
Hmm.
It's not a meal. You shouldn't be just drinking beer as a meal as itself, but it does like contain
Yeah.
magnesium, selenium, potassium, phosphorus, biotin, chromium, and some vitamin B's as well. And I'm just going to name some couple of beers just like for comparison. So you have your Budweiser Select 55. So Budweiser were trying to compete against mixture of ultra like the lighter beers for the calories because a lot of people's like, oh, I want to drink beer, but I don't want the calories. So they made like the less calories. So like each bottle of beer, which is 12 ounces, has if the Budweiser Select 55, which the name Select 55 means 55 calories, but
Hmm.
the alcohol content is 2.4%, with their carbs of in the grams 1.8. So it's pretty cool how they just lower the amount of carbs in it,
Yeah.
but then you
Yeah.
lower the amount of carb, you lower the amount of
Calories,
alcohol
right?
or
Oh, yeah, okay. Alcohol too.
alcohol and calories as well, vice
Yeah.
versa. But then your normal Coors Light is 5 grams of carbs with 4.2% of alcohol. Wow, but it's being it's about double. It's 102 calories per bottle.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
um,
well, 4.2 versus 2.4. If you doubled the 2.4, it's 4.8. So you're getting point 0.6 better than, yeah,
yeah.
right.
And then there's another one. It's from Sierra Nevada. It's more like It used to be a microbrew. Now it's kind of like a bigger name, but it's still a microbrew because they do make different kind of beers a lot. Not your
Mm.
typical like there's 3 flavors.
Right, right, right.
This is your Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, and it's 30.3 grams of carbs with 9.6% alcohol and it's about 330 calories. And I'm just saying those three contents because this is like the nutrition factor. But with the Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, they added different kind of hops and different flavoring, so that changes the whole game of
Mm.
flavor profile, what type of taste, and as well as carbs intake because you're adding more barley, you're adding more other stuff like hops,
Yeah.
sugar to
Yeah.
it to increase alcohol content and the taste. So your taste is different from your Budweiser Core Light to the Bigfoot.
Yeah, I've always been interested in trying like, microbrews and craft stuff, but a lot of it seems to be hoppy. Like a lot
Okay.
of the stuff has a lot of hops in it. So I'm just kind of like cordoned off from being able to enjoy that kind of stuff because I just don't, I don't like it.
Well, yeah, it's when you go to microbrews, you do taste different kind of beers. That's becoming more of like a beer snob in the sense. Oh, I
Yeah.
only drink this, or you taste this. Oh, I like this. And the whole point of having your creating this community of beer drinkers is not just to get drunk, of
Yeah, yeah.
actually enjoying
Enjoying the taste
a
of.
bottle of beer
Yeah.
or a cup of beer
Well, it's
with
kind of like
people.
axe throwing, right? It's like kind
Yeah,
of trying to be like a mini subculture thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And creating this like microbrews. Now there's microbrews and there's just only in that location. They do sell it to local um, breweries or local like places just to
Or
kind of
retailers. Yeah.
retailers just to get the name out, just so they could come back in the atmosphere. And they do bar leagues, beer leagues as well. They'll
Mm.
play darts at the brewery or at another place they'll do, or after they go play soccer or any kind of sport, and then after that they come back for a discounted price beer and
Right.
XYZ.
Okay, cool.
Um, and this is why I do enjoy having a couple beer with friends. Um, and it's always like talk about I have an Instagram as well called It's a Beery Day, and just talk about different type of beers and what the
Yeah.
alcohol content and different type of what is there. The
Yeah, if
profile,
listeners want
different
to submit
profile.
a beer that like is kind of rare and you never heard of, like where can
It's
they send it to?
it will be it's a Beery Day, and it's on Instagram, and we just talk about different type of beers and what the taste, and you kind of like send us a submission. We'll give you a shout out, and as well as some interaction to the public as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I've also submitted a few, as you know. So yeah,
yeah, and that's something that was a nice little project and still is. But we are always looking for new submission from our fans, as well as just talking about creating this community of beer drinkers, and understanding new type of drinks. If you like a new try, let's just say you like a new wit beer, you look in that profile, you look at these pictures, you'll find another beer that's kind of like similar to it, and you want to try it as well.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, we could make a community of beers where like everybody just cosplays as a beer and goes to a beer con, right? And everyone's just like,
yeah.
just all
And
beers, drinking beers.
another thing that comes back of it, like a lot of people, like this community of drinking beers, is not just like going out having fun. Like people make Olympics of just drinking beers. Like I know,
Mhm. Yeah,
as well as like Beer Fest. If anyone watched the movies Beer Fest, that whole movie is about a hidden underground uh, competition of just drinking beer
yeah,
competitively and fast, and how much can you hold, different type of exercise, different type of obstacle courses, and as well as different type of position those drinking beers. So I felt like that was actually pretty cool on how that community comes out. Like in Germany they do that Oktoberfest, which they actually do
yeah,
in September, but they call
yeah.
it Oktoberfest, and that was actually like pretty cool. That whole couple of days is just a purely just drinking events, which I would love to do one time in my life.
Oh, for
Just
sure. It was so cool. Like, I mean, it wasn't Oktoberfest, of course, when I went to Germany in
Mhm.
December, but I went to a brew house, and that was so awesome. Like a legit beer hall.
Yeah.
And you had the people wearing the clothes and the dancing, and the beers were massive, and yeah, it was a great time. I had schnitzels. It was good stuff.
Yeah, and like besides that, like that's much about beers and histories about it.
Yeah.
Always about different stuff that you constantly talk about, but at that end, kind of just want to put it on a high note about drinking beers with the Beer Olympics, the Beer Fest, and all that stuff. But listeners, thank you for listening to us for this week episode about beers. You can catch us on Training Brains podcast at gmail.com to let us know.
Mhm.
Like and subscribe us at our YouTube page, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, as well as trying to keep up to date. And as well, if you do comment, go on our Facebook Training Brains to let us know how we were doing. Interact with us on Tuesday, Thursdays about what kind of topics that you want us to talk about, as well as different kind of other topics besides beer and other. If you want to talk about sports, finance as well, we do hit all parks. We try to
Yeah,
create community of people and picking up each other's brains, kind of trading information to one another, and that was the whole
exactly.
point.
That is
Um,
the whole point of this podcast, man. And like
um,
we've just been talking about what we enjoy talking about, and of course, we're open to suggestions as soon as we get them,
yeah.
and we'll do the research and just discuss what we know about it. I just had an idea actually,
Mm.
and it's kind of too late for this episode, but that's okay. Where we could actually have a drink of the drink that we're covering that week. Uh, for that episode. So like if we do vodka next week, get a vodka, or if we do rum next week, get a rum.
Hmm.
Uh, and
And
yeah, what do you think?
that's something that could be interesting. We could
Yeah.
definitely talk about that after.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
And also, hey, people, be responsible, be the appropriate drinking age in your
Yes, exactly.
country, or and just be smart.
Yeah, be smart
But
and have fun.
besides that, check us out on Training Brains podcast at gmail.com. Like and subscribe us, and we'll see you next
Yes.
week.
Yeah. See you next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.